You say you want to improve, but wanting is not the same as willing. Wanting is cheap. Wanting costs you nothing. Wanting can sit on a couch and dream itself into the grave. Willing, however, demands blood. It demands the surrender of excuses you have protected like sacred relics. Improvement does not come because you feel inspired, because inspiration is a visitor that comes and goes as it pleases. Improvement comes when you decide that your life will no longer be governed by your moods, your past, or your comfort. You do not force yourself to improve by waiting for a feeling. You force yourself by confronting the truth about who you are and refusing to negotiate with that version of yourself any longer. Most people spend their lives lying to themselves in small, respectable ways. They call laziness rest. They call fear wisdom. They call compromise balance. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Improvement begins when you stop softening the language of your failures and start calling things by their proper names. You are not stuck because the world is against you. You are stuck because you have tolerated what should have been confronted. You have made peace with things that should have been put to death. Until you are willing to be brutally honest with yourself, improvement will remain a theory you admire rather than a reality you live. You must understand this. No one drifts into discipline. No one accidentally becomes strong. No one wakes up one day and finds that they have become wise, courageous, and self-controlled. Drift always leads downward. Neglect always produces decay. If you are not intentionally improving, you are unintentionally declining. There is no neutral ground. Every day you either take ground or you lose it, and the loss is often so subtle that you do not notice it until years have passed and you can no longer recognize the person you were meant to become. Forcing yourself to improve begins with a war against self-pity. Self-pity is one of the most destructive forces in the human heart because it disguises itself as compassion. It whispers that you have suffered more than others, that your circumstances excuse your lack of progress, that tomorrow will be a better day to start. Self-pity never calls you upward. It always invites you to lie down. If you allow it to speak unchecked, it will slowly convince you that mediocrity is justified and that excellence is for other people with easier lives. You must silence it, not gently, but decisively. You will not improve until you accept responsibility without reservation. This does not mean that everything that happened to you was your fault. It means that everything that happens next is your responsibility. Blame is a comfortable prison because it removes the burden of action. As long as someone else is responsible, you are free to remain unchanged. But the moment you accept responsibility, comfort ends and power begins. You may not control what shaped you, but you do control what you allow to shape you now. There is a kind of violence required for improvement, not against others, but against your own disordered desires. You must learn to say no to yourself more often than you say yes. The self you are trying to become will never emerge if you keep obeying the self you are trying to leave behind. Improvement is not about adding a few good habits to an otherwise untouched life. It is about tearing down structures that cannot coexist with growth. Some routines must die. Some relationships must change. Some pleasures must be restricted. If everything in your life stays the same, do not expect yourself to become different. You say you lack motivation, but what you lack is conviction. Motivation follows clarity, not the other way around. When you are clear about what is at stake, when you understand the cost of remaining as you are, motivation becomes almost irrelevant. A person who truly understands what is being lost does not need to be coaxed into action. Look honestly at your life. Look at the trajectory you are on. If nothing changes, where will you be in 5 years, 10 years, at the end of your days? Let that vision disturb you. Let it rob you of sleep. Improvement often begins with a holy dissatisfaction, a refusal to be comforted by the thought that this is just how things are. You must stop romanticizing your potential and start dealing with your practice. Potential is a cruel comfort because it allows you to feel exceptional without being disciplined. You tell yourself that you could be great if you tried, but that sentence hides a lie. If you were willing, you already would be trying. Improvement does not ask what you could become under ideal conditions. It asks what you will do today with the time, strength, and clarity you currently possess. The future is shaped by ordinary, often boring acts of obedience carried out when no one is watching and nothing feels dramatic. Do not underestimate the power of small, relentless faithfulness. Most people fail not because they aim too low, but because they refuse to be consistent. They want transformation without repetition, growth without routine, harvest without sowing. Improvement is built in the uncelebrated hours, in the moments when quitting would be easy and justifiable. When you force yourself to improve, you do not look for heroic bursts of effort. You look for sustainable obedience. You show up when you do not feel like it. You do the work even when the results are invisible. You trust that truth compounds, even when progress seems painfully slow. You will need to learn to embrace discomfort, because improvement and comfort are incompatible companions. Comfort seeks preservation, improvement demands change. If your life is arranged in such a way that nothing challenges you, nothing stretches you, nothing confronts you, then you have designed a system that will protect your weaknesses. Forcing yourself to improve means intentionally placing yourself in situations where your inadequacies are exposed. Not to shame you, but to train you. Muscles grow by resistance, not by ease. Character grows the same way. You must also learn to guard your mind with seriousness. What you allow to occupy your thoughts will eventually command your actions. Improvement is not merely behavioral, it is deeply mental. You cannot constantly feed your mind with distraction, comparison, and triviality, and then wonder why you lack depth and resolve. You must become ruthless about what you consume, what you dwell on, what you rehearse in your inner world. A disciplined life begins with disciplined thinking. You cannot rise above the ceiling of your own thought patterns. There will be days when forcing yourself to improve feels almost cruel. You will feel tired, misunderstood, and alone in your resolve. In those moments, you must remember that discipline is a form of self-respect. You are not punishing yourself by demanding more. You are honoring the value of your life. You are declaring that your existence is too important to be wasted on impulse and convenience. Improvement is not an act of self-hatred. It is an act of reverence for what you have been entrusted with. You will fail along the way. That is not a possibility, it is a certainty. The question is not whether you will stumble, but what you will do when you do. Many people abandon improvement not because they fail, but because they are shocked by failure. They expected the process to be cleaner, more dignified. But growth is messy. It exposes weakness. It humbles pride. When you fail, do not dramatize it. Do not turn a stumble into an identity. Repent quickly, learn honestly, and return to the path without theatrics. Do not wait for accountability to be imposed on you. Seek it. Invite it. Improvement flourishes in the presence of truth spoken by others who are not impressed by your excuses. Isolation is dangerous because it allows self-deception to go unchallenged. You need voices in your life who will tell you when you are drifting, when you are compromising, when you are lying to yourself, not to control you, but to sharpen you. Improvement is personal, but it is not meant to be solitary. You must also learn patience, not the passive kind that waits, but the active kind that endures. Improvement is often slower than you want and harder than you expected. There will be long seasons where obedience feels unrewarded and progress feels invisible. These seasons test whether you love growth itself or merely the applause that sometimes accompanies it. Forcing yourself to improve means continuing even when improvement does not feel emotionally gratifying. You walk by conviction, not by sensation. Be careful not to confuse business with growth. Activity can be another form of avoidance. You can fill your days with motion and still remain unchanged at the core. Improvement requires reflection, not just effort. You must regularly examine your motives, your patterns, your direction. Ask yourself hard questions and refuse easy answers. Where am I avoiding responsibility? Where am I settling for appearances rather than substance? Where am I excusing what I should be confronting? You will need courage, because improvement often requires you to disappoint people who benefited from your stagnation. Not everyone will celebrate your growth. Some will feel threatened by it. Some will miss the version of you that required less from them. You cannot allow the fear of relational discomfort to keep you bound to an inferior version of yourself. Improvement sometimes costs approval, but the price of staying the same is far greater. Understand this clearly. Forcing yourself to improve is not about becoming superior to others. Pride is not growth, it is decay in disguise. True improvement produces humility, because the more you grow, the more clearly you see how much remains undone. If your pursuit of growth makes you harsh, arrogant, or contemptuous, you have missed the point entirely. The goal is not self-exaltation, but alignment with truth, discipline, and purpose. You must cultivate a long view of your life. Many people sabotage improvement because they make decisions based on immediate relief rather than lasting fruit. They choose what feels good now over what will be good later. Forcing yourself to improve means learning to delay gratification, to endure short-term pain for long-term clarity. Ask yourself not what this choice will give you today, but what it will make of you tomorrow. You are not too old to improve, and you are not too young to begin. These are lies that protect delay. As long as you have breath, you have responsibility. Improvement does not require perfect conditions. It requires a decisive will. Stop waiting for your schedule to clear, your confidence to rise, your circumstances to change. Start where you are with what you have and refuse to move backward. There is a strange freedom that comes when you stop trying to negotiate with your weaker self. When the debate ends, peace begins. Decide what must be done and do it without constant inner argument. The more you argue with yourself, the more power you give to hesitation. Clarity simplifies obedience. Decide who you are becoming, and let that decision govern your actions when your emotions protest. Do not despise discipline because it feels restrictive. Discipline is what creates the margin in which life can flourish. An undisciplined life is not free, it is enslaved to impulse. When you force yourself to improve, you are not shrinking your life, you are expanding it. You are creating the capacity to handle greater responsibility, deeper joy, and more meaningful contribution. In the end, improvement is not about crafting an impressive image. It is about becoming a person of substance when no one is watching. It is about integrity that does not depend on recognition. It is about living in such a way that you can stand alone with your conscience and not be ashamed. This kind of life is not achieved accidentally. It is chosen daily, sometimes hourly, through deliberate acts of obedience that feel costly in the moment, but prove invaluable over time. If you are waiting for permission to demand more of yourself, consider this your confrontation. Your life is already moving in a direction. The only question is whether you will take hold of it or continue to be carried by it. Do not ask whether improvement is possible. Ask whether you are willing to do what improvement requires, to lay down what is familiar, to endure what is difficult, to persist when nothing in you wants to persist, to stand up tomorrow and do again what you know must be done, even if the fire feels dim and the road feels long and the voice inside you said would be easier to stop and settle and become like everyone else and call that peace. Improvement is a ruthless act of responsibility and discipline, not a feeling or inspiration, and that truth alone already offends the modern mind. We are conditioned to wait until we feel ready, until motivation strikes, until the internal weather is pleasant enough to begin the work. But improvement does not ask for permission from your emotions. It does not care whether you feel inspired or exhausted, confident or afraid. It arrives with a demand, not a suggestion, and that demand is this: take responsibility for who you are becoming, not who you were meant to be, not who you could have been under better circumstances, but who you are actively shaping yourself into by your daily decisions. Responsibility is terrifying because it removes every hiding place. Once you accept it, you can no longer blame your past, your upbringing, your lack of support, or the unfairness of life for the condition of your character today. Responsibility does not deny that you were wounded. It simply refuses to allow those wounds to become an excuse for decay. The moment you take responsibility, you stand exposed before the truth and the truth is rarely gentle. It reveals not only what has been done to you, but what you have allowed to continue. Improvement begins when you stop asking who failed you and start asking what you are going to do now that you know better. Discipline follows responsibility like a shadow. Without discipline, responsibility is just a word you admire. Discipline is the practical, daily enforcement of what you know to be right, even when every part of you resists it. It is the decision to act according to truth rather than appetite. Discipline does not wait for alignment between desire and duty. It creates that alignment through repeated obedience. Over time, the will learns to obey, the emotions learn to follow, and the chaos within you begins to quiet, not because life has become easier, but because you have become stronger. If you are waiting for inspiration, you have already misunderstood improvement. Inspiration is unpredictable and fleeting. It comes and goes without explanation, and it owes you nothing. To build your life on inspiration is to build on weather. Improvement requires something sturdier: conviction. Conviction does not rise and fall with mood. It does not negotiate with discomfort. It anchors you when enthusiasm evaporates and leaves you standing in the cold clarity of what must still be done. Conviction says, this matters whether I feel like it or not. Telling the truth about your failures is the first violent act against the false self you have been protecting. Most people do not lie loudly, they lie subtly. They minimize, reframe, soften, and justify. They explain away patterns as exceptions and habits as accidents. They call repeated disobedience a struggle and chronic avoidance a phase. But improvement cannot coexist with dishonesty. You cannot heal what you refuse to diagnose. You cannot correct what you insist on defending. Telling the truth means standing still long enough to see yourself clearly, without theatrics, without self-hatred, and without excuses. This truth-telling is not about public confession or dramatic self-condemnation. It is about private clarity. It is about naming what is actually happening in your life rather than what you wish were happening. You are not working on it if the same behaviors repeat without resistance. You are not trying your best if your best never requires sacrifice. Truth strips away comforting illusions and leaves you with a simple, often uncomfortable reality. This is who you are when no one is forcing you to be better. Rejecting excuses is not an act of cruelty toward yourself. It is an act of respect. Excuses treat you as powerless. They imply that you are at the mercy of circumstance, personality, or fate. When you reject excuses, you are declaring that your actions still matter even when conditions are imperfect. You are saying that difficulty does not absolve you of responsibility, and pain does not give you permission to decay. Excuses may explain behavior, but they do not justify it, and improvement begins when explanation stops replacing action. Many people confuse understanding themselves with excusing themselves. Self-awareness becomes a shield rather than a tool. They can articulate their flaws eloquently, trace them back to childhood wounds, and analyze them endlessly. Yet nothing changes. Insight without discipline only deepens frustration. The purpose of understanding is correction, not comfort. If your self-knowledge does not lead to different choices, It is simply another form of avoidance dressed as wisdom. Embracing discomfort is non-negotiable because discomfort is the currency of growth. There is no version of improvement that does not involve tension, resistance, and strain. Every meaningful change requires you to operate beyond your current capacity, and that stretch will feel unnatural at first. Comfort is not neutral, it is preservative. It keeps things exactly as they are. If your life is arranged to minimize discomfort at all costs, then it is also arranged to prevent growth. Discomfort exposes where you are weak, undisciplined, or fearful. And that exposure is precisely what makes it valuable. When you feel resistance rising, when you feel the urge to retreat, rationalize, or delay, you are standing at the edge of growth. Most people turn back at that point, mistaking resistance for a sign that something is wrong. In reality, resistance often means you are finally doing something right. Choosing consistent obedience over comfort is where improvement either becomes real or remains imaginary. Consistency is unglamorous. It does not offer the emotional high of sudden breakthroughs or dramatic transformations. It is repetitive, ordinary, and often boring. And yet, it is consistency that reshapes identity. What you do repeatedly becomes who you are. Occasional effort changes nothing. Sustained obedience changes everything. Obedience does not mean blind compliance or mindless routine. It means aligning your actions with what you know to be true, even when your feelings protest. It means doing the work on days when it feels pointless, continuing when results are invisible, and refusing to let temporary discomfort dictate permanent decisions. Obedience trains the will, and a trained will is one of the most powerful forces in a human life. Comfort, on the other hand, is persuasive. It does not shout, it whispers. It suggests that rest is deserved, that tomorrow will be better, that one exception will not matter. Comfort rarely presents itself as an enemy. It presents itself as kindness. But comfort, when enthroned, slowly erodes discipline. It dulls urgency. It softens standards. It convinces you that improvement can wait, and what waits long enough eventually disappears. Mood is an unreliable leader. If you allow your mood to determine your obedience, you will live inconsistently and call it authenticity. Moods change with sleep, weather, conversation, success, and disappointment. They are informative but not authoritative. Forcing yourself to improve means deciding that your values, not your emotions, will govern your actions. You act not because you feel aligned, but because you have already decided who you are becoming. Self-pity is one of the greatest enemies of improvement because it feels justified. It focuses your attention inward, magnifying your pain while shrinking your responsibility. It invites you to measure your life by what you have endured rather than by what you are doing with what remains. Self-pity does not deny effort outright. It postpones it indefinitely. It says, "Not now, you have suffered enough, you deserve relief." And slowly, quietly, it teaches you to settle. Forcing yourself to improve requires a willingness to be misunderstood by yourself. There will be moments when your own thoughts accuse you of being too harsh, too demanding, too extreme. But discipline often feels extreme to a mind accustomed to indulgence. The question is not whether your standards feel uncomfortable, but whether they are aligned with truth. Growth often requires you to act contrary to your immediate emotional instincts in service of a deeper, long-term good. This path will expose you. As you strip away excuses and comforts, you will become acutely aware of how far you still have to go. Improvement humbles before it exalts. It reveals weakness before it builds strength. If you are not prepared to see yourself clearly, you will retreat back into illusion. But if you endure that clarity, something remarkable begins to happen. Respect for yourself starts to grow, not because you are perfect, but because you are no longer hiding. Discipline creates trust within yourself. Each time you do what you said you would do, even when it is difficult, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. Over time, this internal trust becomes confidence, not the loud, performative kind, but a quiet assurance rooted in integrity. You stop needing constant motivation because you have evidence. You know that when it is time to act, you will act. Improvement is not about becoming harsh or joyless. It is about ordering your life so that joy is no longer dependent on indulgence. True satisfaction comes not from ease, but from alignment between belief and behavior. When you force yourself to improve, you are not rejecting happiness. You are rejecting the shallow substitutes that promise relief while delivering stagnation. This process does not end. Responsibility and discipline are not phases, they are postures. There will always be new weaknesses to confront, new comforts to resist, new truths to obey. Improvement is not a destination you arrive at and relax. It is a way of living that refuses to drift. It is the daily decision to stand upright when it would be easier to collapse, to act deliberately when it would be easier to react, to tell the truth when it would be easier to soften it, to choose obedience when every impulse urges surrender.